Thanks everybody for coming out to our talk this afternoon about the event platform. Calling this your camp website here because really the idea is to provide a set of tools that you can use to easily spin up a website for a Drupal camp or similar event. So, red button is engaged. For anyone who doesn't know me already, my name is Martin Anderson-Clutz. I am a Principal Solutions Engineer at Acquia. I'm also on a podcast called Talking Drupal. Last year, I served as a track lead for the events recipe as part of the Starshot initiative. Done a bunch of different certifications, and if anybody wants to reach out to me directly, you can find me as mandclu on all of the Drupal and social platforms. So what are we going to talk about today? We're going to start off with some background around what is Event Platform, what are some of the capabilities that you'll be able to use out of the box should you choose to start with it. I'm going to do a hands-on demo to give you a sense of the capability, what it's like to work with the actual tool set, and then end off by talking about, what's the road ahead? What are some of the things that we want to do to continue to improve on the Event Platform? But starting off with what is the Event Platform today? Really, it's a set of modules that simplify the setup of a website for a Drupal camp or similar event. So by design, it's modular, so you don't have to use all of it. You can use sort of bits and pieces that may be relevant to something that you're doing that isn't a Drupal camp. But you're probably going to get the most value out of it if you are doing things like, having user-submitted session proposals, rating those, accepting some, maybe waitlisting others, scheduling those kinds of things. There is a modular content architecture that it provides, so things like sessions and BOFs, sponsors and sponsorships, job listings, featured speakers, a few other things that we'll sort of dive into as we go. Now, it is kind of the evolution of something that came before called the Camp or Conference Organizing Distribution, or COD as it was known in the community. Very popular and beloved in sort of Drupal 7 days, but never, unfortunately, really made the leap to Drupal 8. And so there was an initiative by the Event Organizers Working Group to come up with kind of a more modern alternative, and that's where the Event Platform really came to be. So as you use the Event Platform, you're going to be able to do things like take advantage of a workflow to moderate user-submitted sessions. It will automatically notify speakers when their session is accepted or rejected. You can do things like display sponsors prioritized by the level of sponsorship they've committed to. And then also there's a capability to do things like have users flag sessions that they're interested in and then see a schedule that's sort of the sessions that they've flagged for potentially attending. There are also a variety of different tools built into the Event Platform. So there's a tool for generating different time slots. There's also a way to drag and drop the actual scheduling of your session. We'll see both of these in action as we go through. Something new for 2025 is there's now a built-in ability to actually rate your sessions. And I'll point out this is a Likert element in the web form. So it's a single element, makes it really fast if you want to sort of change the criteria that your camp wants to use for evaluating sessions. And then you can use sort of the average session score as a fast way to moderate your sessions, so to really pick which ones you want to accept, maybe have other ones waitlisted, and then others sort of regretfully decline. Another big or momentous change in Event Platform this year is really being able to create a purpose-built theme. So it's really kind of a fork of the custom theme that was generated for the Florida Drupal Camp earlier this year. We named it Event Horizon, and one of the big changes was to really try and make as much as possible configurable directly in the theme UI. So one of the things that we had seen for some of the smaller camps that were using Event Platform was that they were really sort of minimally changing things like Olivero just to sort of a quick way to get something published. They didn't necessarily have sort of the tools or resources to develop a fully custom theme. And so having something that they can use more off the shelf, do just a little bit of configuration to kind of give it some of the flavor of their local camp, for them would be enough. And then obviously more ambitious camps could either sub-theme Event Horizon or potentially have kind of a fully baked custom theme of their own. Under the hood, it's using things like single directory components and CSS variables, so really trying to give it kind of a modern infrastructure as well. So here's an example of what the homepage looks like, and we'll get sort of a hands-on demonstration of that. But where a lot of themes will give you the opportunity to do things like upload a custom logo, in Event Horizon you can also, through the configurations, specify things like a primary and secondary color, and that will be used a few different places throughout the site, as well as upload other graphics. So on the home page, as we scroll, and you'll see this later, there's kind of a texture that overlays the type. You can upload a picture for that. There's kind of an SVG graphic there on the bottom right. You can upload a replacement for that. There's also a video file that sort of plays on a loop on the home page, and you also can upload a video that's sort of, again, custom to your camp as well. Here's an example of the actual event page. So you can see it's listing out the key dates, the sponsors, featured speakers, and so on. On a session page, you can see it sort of has some custom things around how the different categorization is displayed. Speakers, it'll also display things like concurrent sessions, so other sessions on at the same time. And another thing we did earlier this year was really try and provide more of an out-of-the-box experience. So a couple of the camps that had used the event platform for their camps had given feedback that they expected it to be a little more feature complete. So the original sort of scope or ambition for Event Platform, and as I had seen it, was really more around the features that are specific to a camp, assuming that people would want to build out the rest of the site in a way that was sort of more custom to their camp. But again, some camp organizers really just wanted something that they could stand up and then move on to other parts of the camp that they needed to organize. And so Event Platform Starter was really sort of trying to deliver on that idea. And so in addition to having sort of Event Platform and Event Horizon, it's a recipe designed to pull in elements of things like Drupal CMS so that you have a more robust starting point. You can take advantage of some of the work that's gone into establishing best practices around sharing and security and some other things, again, sort of baked into Drupal CMS. So you can see at the bottom here, those are kind of the 4 Drush commands that you're meant to run to sort of get everything fully installed. Originally it was going to be a recipe, but there are some issues with the recipe runner that prevent this from working as a recipe that you can just sort of apply and have it do everything for you. So you do these 4 Drush commands, and technically that's everything that you need. But then if you go a little further down, you can see there are some other ones that will optionally allow you to apply recipes from Drupal CMS, again, to give you additional capabilities and give you that more robust starting point. So earlier this year, I decided to also tackle something that had been in discussion since the very early days of Event Platform. So we had started with a code base that we more or less inherited from the Florida Drupal Camp website, and really the approach that they had always taken was to treat each year's camp as kind of its own website. And so what they had was kind of a process where after the camp was over, they would do a static export using something like Tome, basically put that into a place as a static site that could still be accessed by people, and then effectively refresh the database on the site so that the next year's sessions could all be sort of captured and rated and scheduled and so on. But there are sites like DrupalCon, so events.drupal.org, that have multiple events. And there are sites like MidCamp that continue to collect sessions every year and sort of keep them all in sort of a single unified database. So what we decided to take on was updating Event Platform to have kind of that multi-event architecture. So people could stand it up and still use it for single events and refresh those every year if they want, but now they have the option to sort of have multiple events, whether in the same year or over multiple years. So the biggest part of that was really sort of adding different kinds of contextual arguments to a variety of different views that are built into the Event Platform. And one of the things that I discovered through some initial investigation is that the view system really has the best support for contextual arguments using taxonomy terms. And so now the events have been implemented as taxonomy terms, and there are entity reference fields that have been added to a bunch of different content types, even some other kinds of bundles, so things like storage entities. And there is a module called Taxonomy Views Integrator that's been used to customize the listing behavior specifically for events without impacting other kinds of taxonomy views. One of the other things that I discovered is that as soon as you add contextual arguments to a view, the views pages will no longer be able to have menu links. And it sort of makes sense, but also added a fair bit of complexity because still wanted to be able to have sort of predictable navigation between different kinds of listings, so session listings versus sponsor listings for the same event. And so eventually created this module called Smart Menu Links that really is designed to sort of look for and validate sessions based on sort of the current path. And in some ways it's really designed to sort of mimic how Views itself looks for contextual arguments in the same way. And so if you use it, you'll see that there's a lot of similarities that way. But it also can do things like having identified the referenced entity based on the current path, if it has a certain moderation state, it can be specific in terms of whether or not it should show. And then lastly, the thing to point out is that links that you create through Smart Menu Links are also configuration entities. So in the same way that, if you were defining the navigation as related to like a views page, it would be something that you would sort of, version control and deploy using code. And so you can do the same kind of thing with Smart Menu Links. Also had some other sort of dynamic elements built in. So things like within an event display, so once you're in a section of a site that's really relevant to a specific event, things like the site name as it applies, as it shows in sort of the top left, will be sort of, again, specific to that event name. Sort of drew inspiration from that to how events.drupal.org works. The name and the logo in that block will actually reference the route for the event as opposed to the site route, again, similar to how events.drupal.org works. These were implemented as part of the Event Horizon theme, so if you were going more of a custom theming route, you would probably need to look in there for inspiration on how to implement a similar approach for your own theme, if that is indeed something you wanted to follow suit on. Now, as I was working on all of that, I also had an interesting idea. What if we could also have an event planning workflow? Because one of the things that I had seen, sort of attending a variety of Drupal events, listening on the event organizers Slack channel, I could see that there was sort of a common pattern that a lot of different Drupal camps tend to follow. So they start off by announcing some dates, that typically will be featured on the homepage, maybe along with sponsors and featured speakers. Then they'll issue a call for session proposals, having clear call to actions to have people submit their own session proposals, and then they'll have a session deadline, at which point they might start to have some featured sessions listed. Once the schedule is published, there's typically a push for people to get registered as attendees, and then once a camp is underway, links for things like today's schedule, could be things like how to get to the venue, those kinds of things, and then once a camp is complete, then they'll typically have messages on there around, thanks to everyone for making this an unforgettable event. Here's a link to our playlist, or our video playlist, those kinds of things. But I started to have ideas like, is there a way that we could have a site based on event platform automatically highlight different information at each stage? And could we also do things like automate the transition between these different stages? Because we were already capturing information for when a number of these different dates should happen, and so by just capturing a couple more dates, we could actually fully automate that. So I started a conversation with a variety of event organizers, tried to sort of lay out a spreadsheet with some different ideas and collect some feedback, and really sort of finalized it on this particular list. So down sort of the left, you can see the different states in the workflow that we were considering, and then some different places on the website where we could feature different kinds of messaging. And so really trying to sort of, for each of those, decide what would be kind of a sensible default, but then also have it all engineered so that if your particular camp wanted to highlight different kinds of information, you would have the flexibility to sort of tailor it to what makes most sense for your particular camp as well. Also did a few other things. So in the top right of the site, and you'll see this as we go through the demo, there's a custom CTA block, and it'll show an appropriate CTA based on the event's workflow state. So some dynamic code in there that, again, based on the workflow state, you can have it all pre-configured so that, as the site moves through that, it'll automatically go through what you decided at the start was the messaging for each of those stages. And then also wanted to have the ability to show and hide different blocks based on the moderation state of the event. And so found this module called Moderation State Condition. Out of the box, it only worked with nodes, but was able to work with the maintainers of that module to get a release cut that actually also now includes support for taxonomy terms. Also realized that there were some interesting things around the way the permissions work. So had given people with the speaker role the ability to create session proposals, but the challenge was that once the call for proposals was closed, they didn't actually lose that permission automatically. So they could technically still create session proposals. Not a huge thing because people could just not publish them or delete them, but still kind of you wouldn't really expect it to work that way. So as of Drupal 11, we have this cool thing called the Access Policy API. And so we were able to create a custom access policy by implementing a cache context and access policy service so that speakers actually only have the ability now to create session proposals before that, that call for proposals has closed. Now, from the beginning, Event Platform had this workflow for session moderation. So the default draft and publish states, also the proposed state as what sessions would automatically be created with, and then the moderator could go through and accept or reject different sessions. And that worked pretty well, but there were a few things that were sort of a bit curious about how that worked. So, the fact that we had this published state that was never really used seemed a little curious. Speakers still needed to sort of manually confirm as sort of an outside part of the process whether or not they would actually be able to deliver the session that they had proposed. And then, lots of camps will also waitlist a number of sessions. So instead of rejecting or accepting all of them, there might be a certain number that, almost made the cut, and they'd like to sort of have those reserved in case some of the accepted speakers kind of fall through. So what we ended up doing was updating it. So taking that default published state and renaming it as confirmed, and then also adding a state so that maybe somebody whose session was accepted but decided that they couldn't actually deliver it, ultimately, now they can mark it as declined, and then added that waitlist state so that people can move sessions as needed between sort of those different states. Also used a module called moderation links so that when the session acceptance email goes out, there's links in there where the speaker can automatically say, yes, I can confirm that I will be presenting, or no, I won't be able to, and that automatically updates the state so that there isn't sort of that outside manual process to know whether or not each of the sessions will actually be confirmed. Also relied heavily on event condition action. I think Dries did a good job of sort of explaining the value of ECA. Definitely, I would say, in terms of the implementation specifically for Event Platform, it replaced a number of other kind of very specific contrib modules. Like, as an example, Workspace email was one. Workbench email was the one that we were using to send out emails before. Now all of that is done in a more sophisticated way using ECA. Created some new custom functionality. But the big benefit, the way I see it, is that by doing it in ECA, it's also all configuration that you can tailor to your own site's specific needs. So if it's implemented a specific way based on, again, discussions with a variety of other camp organizers, if you need it to work in a different way, you have the flexibility to go in and change it to whatever you need specifically. So a few examples here. This is the model that will look for events that are basically due to transition based on their date. And so we'll automatically perform that and then write to the log that it's done that, and then finally clear the cache so that it will display the changes. Here's another one that will basically send out automatic reminders if a session has been accepted but not confirmed or rejected by the speaker. So sending those out a couple of days before the session submission deadline, and then one more the day before. Here's one that basically performs different actions around sending those emails based on sort of the workflow transitions to a state. So, when it's accepted, rejected, or waitlisted. Later on, if an accepted session gets declined, some of those kinds of things. So again, lots of very rich functionality implemented through ECA that is fully customizable if you need to. Now, one thing I wanted to mention is that you might look at, the event platform and say that the installed user base isn't huge. So, is it really important that all this work is going into the event platform? And there's a couple of things I would say. So number one, the work that's been done on the event platform has actually had a much larger set of impact because it's created work for a variety of other projects. So as an example, specifically for some of the more flexible ways that I wanted to be able to place blocks in themes, ended up working with the maintainers of the recipe system to implement config actions specifically for placing blocks in either the default or admin themes. Also, in a similar way, added new capabilities to web forms, smart date, moderation state, condition, content moderation link, and ECA. So, adding to the capabilities that you get out of the box with all of those popular projects. And then even had some capabilities that right away implemented as kind of new contrib modules, so that even though we were really kind of scratching the itch of things that we knew we needed to do specifically for event platform, implementing those in a way that those could be leveraged by projects that had nothing to do with sort of, a camp website. So view summary tabs, smart menu links is one that we've already talked about today, but there's a couple of other pieces already today. Things around the scheduling interface that we're going to see that will probably also be moved out to contrib. But the other thing is that camps play a really important role in the Drupal community. They're kind of the grassroots and in some ways the lifeblood of the Drupal community in terms of really being that local point of engagement and ultimately being where people get excited about Drupal by having that face-to-face interaction that eventually will inspire them to attend events like this one, like DrupalCon, that are also vitally important to the community as well. So that's a lot of talk, and I think it's a good opportunity to go ahead and jump into a live demo here. So let's go ahead and switch over to basically a fresh install of Event Platform. So out of the box, what it's going to do is give you an example event that you can go in and customize. So there's a button here right on the home page if you're an admin to lead you to go in and customize the event. So you can go in and change the label for the specific event. So in this case, by default, it's labeled 2026, but it could be Drupal Camp Nara or whatever it might be. You can give it the location, what your dates are. There's a variety of different dates in here, some of which it's going to populate. But again, this is all fieldable. So if your camp had other dates that you wanted to have listed here, so it could be things like early bird registration or different kinds of things like that. Again, it's very easy to update all of that through the field UI. In the same way, you can manage things that are going to appear on the home page, like the stats and the program information. So if I just go back here, we can sort of highlight where those are. So down here is where the stats appear, and then in this little flyout here is where the high-level program information will appear. And then later on, once the schedule is actually published, again, automatically by the workflow, then it'll actually link to the relevant tabs in the actual schedule based on how you've set up that high-level program information. Now, if we go into the actual event display, it's going to show more of the detailed information. So in this case, it'll show sort of the key dates. We can have sponsored and featured speakers. So let's go ahead and just see what the process looks like to add some of those. So we could add an existing sponsor if we had some in the database, but again, this is fresh install. So we'll go ahead and grab some local information here and create our sponsor. Now, sponsors often will persist year after year, but they might have different sponsorship levels. And so you have this separate idea of a sponsorship at which a particular sponsor will have a level set for 1 or more years. And so as we save that now, it'll take us back to the event page where we can see our sponsor. We can also say we want to add a featured speaker, so maybe Dries has agreed to appear at our camp. So we can go ahead and grab some information. Maybe we'll drop in some lorem ipsum for the description and just grab a couple sentences to appear as the summary. Save that, and again, without even leaving the page, we've been able to add a featured speaker as it applies here. So that gives you sort of a quick idea of, how as an administrator, you've got sort of prompts in all of the right places to be able to manage all of the information. One thing I'll show here is if we update one of the dates, so let's set the session's open date to be in the past. So let's just go ahead and edit this. Maybe we'll just backdate it by a year for the sake of simplicity. So 2025, throw that to September and save that. What you'll notice right away, I must have done the wrong one. Okay, so let's just edit that again. But yeah, so let's go ahead, and this should have been 2026. Let's set that back to 14th. All right. So yeah, it was our sessions open that I meant to edit. Set that back to 2025 and save that. And now what you're going to see is that dates in the past, it will automatically format with a strike through, so it's obvious which ones are in the past versus upcoming. One other thing that I didn't mention before is for your actual camp dates, it will automatically create add calendar links. So again, making it easy for people who are interested in attending to make sure that they have that time sort of blocked off in their calendars. But based on the workflow changes that are going to happen by having the sessions open now in the past, it's going to update the navigation as well as the CTA block that certainly currently is showing as newsletter sign up. So if we actually run our cron job, this is going to take a minute. What you're going to see is that it'll change the CTA now to submit a session. And now some of these links have changed. For example, we now have a sessions menu link. Again, that changes by default. So we could go in and submit a session. Maybe this is a good opportunity to go ahead and show what this looks like as an anonymous user. So as a fresh site visitor. Didn't copy that properly. Copy that again. And let's paste that in. Let's go ahead and go to submit a session. Now that's something you have to be a logged in user to do, so we can create an account. And we'll just do mandclu, and save the account. That will now send our verification email, which we can grab the link for. And copy that address, switch back to our anonymous user, and we can get logged in, set our password. And should be good to go. And now we can go and submit our session. So let's just call this my awesome session. Yada. Shorter version, we'll just call it yada yada. Now we can assign it some metadata. So who's it intended for? We can say all attendees. What is the session category? So maybe related to the topic. And then for the speakers, it's going to automatically set my name in there, but if I have sort of co-presenters, I can also put those in as well. And obviously, the only session status that I can put that in is as proposed. So we'll go ahead and save that. And now what that's going to do is trigger another notification, this time to site admins. Or sorry, this is the confirmation that goes out to the person submitting it, saying thanks for submitting that. So that you sort of have that for your records as well. Now, as the session admin, or site admin, if I go in now, I can see that listed under the sessions. And I could do things like go in and start to evaluate that. So again, using that built-in evaluation system. Now, for the sake of time, what I'm going to do is switch to a DDEV snapshot. That has a number of ratings, and I have a number of them already rated, just so that you can sort of get a sense of the process, but a little bit further along. So that's going to give us a minute. Maybe while we have a minute, any questions so far? Everybody seems good? Yes?
Hi. So technically, this is a suite of modules, I guess, for the upgrade part. Like if we install it for our Drupal camp, how can we get in new functionalities later, especially if we use a custom theme or something?
Yeah, great question. So what I would say is it's probably best to think about it today as really being more like a recipe, in the sense of it's really meant to be more of a starting point. So to the extent that some of the submodules add new things, you might be able to import those pieces of the configuration later. Certainly to the extent that we add additional submodules as discrete pieces, you would definitely be able to sort of install those on top of your existing install. But at this point, sometimes, particularly between major versions, like sites that are already using Event Platform 1, there isn't currently really a clean way to sort of move on to Event Platform 2. All right, on that note, let's go ahead and switch back to our site here. I think what it's going to do is probably want me to log in again because of the way that I make these snapshots. So let's go ahead and do that. And then what we can see is some of the capabilities that are built in here around seeing what sessions are submitted and which ones still need rating. So as an example here, you can see there's a bunch of sessions that have been submitted. In this case, I've already rated all but 2 of them, so we can go into these last 2 and evaluate them. You do have by default, this is going to open up in a modal, but you can have it open up in the settings tray if you would prefer, which can be nice because then you can, if it's a long session description, you can sort of read through it and evaluate it as you go through. And then if we go back to our list and refresh, you can see there's going to be just 1. And let's go into that. Maybe this one we think is a little more promising, so we'll rate it a little higher. Submit that. And now, if we go back to here and refresh, it's going to tell us that we're all done in terms of evaluating sessions. Obviously, this is probably something you're going to do as part of a team. So you're going to want to confirm that other team members are similarly done all of their work in terms of evaluating sessions. But once all of that's done, you're ready to go ahead and move on to the next step, which is really moderating your sessions. So by default, this is going to display all of the sessions ranked in descending order based on the average evaluation score. So we could do things like say, we want to grab the top, 7, and say, let's go ahead and just accept all of those. Give us a confirmation step, and we can say, go ahead and do that. And then once that's done, if we check our Mailpit, we can see that it's sent out all of those notifications. In a similar way, we could do that in a more targeted way. So maybe we want to say, we want to make sure that from a site building standpoint, we're going to grab at least the top couple, let's say, of the site building sessions that were submitted and accept those. Or we could do it, based on audience and those kinds of things. But maybe for the sake of time here, we will just go ahead and go back to our full list and grab the top few of those. Let's see what we've got here. So grab maybe all of those, accept those, and confirm. And maybe we want to grab 4 as our wait list. And proceed with those. And then maybe we've got just the last 3 then that we want to actually reject. But you can see that once the evaluation is done, doing these at least strictly on a scoring basis can actually be a much faster process than doing all of this manually as well. All right, so with all of those moderated now, it's going to list those below, sort of grouped out by based on which ones are accepted, waitlisted, or rejected. And so now we can move on to actually scheduling all of those sessions. Now, if we go into the scheduling interface, it's going to tell us that we need to have time slots before we can actually schedule our sessions. But that's now where we can use our time slot tool. So maybe we say, for this particular event, the 3rd day is contribution day, so we don't need to have session slots. Maybe we don't want to have one over lunch because we want people to sort of do the hallway track thing. We could further customize that, but hopefully you get the idea of how you can sort of customize that quickly. And now with a single click, it'll generate all of those time slots for us. And now if we go back to our scheduler, you can see that it's generated all of those session slots for us, and now we can start to just drag and drop our sessions based on the room and the time we want those different sessions to be done. And I will also point out as we go through here that it's going to automatically not allow us to have 2 sessions by the same person in different rooms at the same time, because obviously a person can't be in 2 places at once. The other thing that we can do is if we want to filter it, we could also say, maybe we want to have all of the beginner sessions in one room so that people who are just getting started can sort of stay in one room, socialize, not get lost, all of those kinds of things. In a similar way, we could say maybe we want to have all of the project management sessions all in one spot. And the other thing I'll point out may have been obvious already, but when you apply a filter, it will highlight scheduled sessions in this yellow color just so that it's easy to sort of see where all of those sessions are as well. So again, that's sort of a very quick run through of the scheduling interface. Again, in the interest of time, I think what we'll do is preload a scheduled version of our site, and we'll have to log in one more time. If there is another question while this is saving, happy to do that now. Yes, good. Question over here.
So, are there any plans for having this schedule builder automated in some AI way?
That's a really interesting question. I mean, I could definitely see being able to craft a prompt to say these are the criteria in
Put
terms
all
of
the something there, and then it just does it.
Yeah, that's a great idea. Okay, so let's go back to our site here, and actually AI is a thing that we're going to hopefully, time allowing, talk quickly about. So let's go back here. It's going to ask me to log in one more time. And, okay. So, okay, let's log in. And then if we go to our schedule now, we can see we've got all of our different sessions that have been scheduled. So it's displaying those within automatically created tabs for each of the days, grouped by the different time according to the rooms. We could go into one of these and say, use a link that's on this to say, add or remove from my schedule. So you have that ability on each session to sort of flag which are the ones that you are interested in, because maybe those are the ones you want to attend. Again, it's going to display other sessions at the same time. So you could also, if you're trying to decide between a couple, go through there. And then also you do have the ability, let's see here, to go to my schedule, which is going to display the sessions that you flagged, again, grouped by day and organized by time, so that you can see your own particular schedule. There has been an interesting conversation this week, specifically for DrupalCon. So somebody wrote a third-party tool that they basically scraped the DrupalCon website and built sort of a standalone app that can export into like an iCalendar file that you can pull in. So that might be something to add on to this as sort of a future state. But anyway, that's sort of your quick run through and demo. So that also transitions us nicely to talking about the future state for the event platform, which is probably how we're going to use our remaining time. So on Drupal Forge, there is a site template you can use if you want to try out Event Platform. You can, in a couple of minutes, spin up an instance, start playing around with it, customize it. If you decide it's something you actually want to turn into a production site, you can move it off of Drupal Forge and onto public hosting. Probably some additional updates coming on that. This site is actually a Drupal camp in southwestern Ontario, Canada, which is around where I live. So I've been helping to organize that, but it's also been a great sort of initial production instance of Event Platform 2, which has obviously taught us a lot about the ways certain things break and edge cases that hadn't been anticipated. So there's going to be some improvements coming out of that. The recipes system, turns out the recipes runner runs much slower for specific technical reasons than Drupal's default module installer, which means that installing the massive number of modules that Event Platform relies on actually chokes the recipes runners. So eventually we want the Event Platform starter to be a recipe, but that may be a ways off. But probably pieces of Event Platform today that are modules, at least some of them could be migrated into recipes over time. There are already a variety of sort of social and SEO optimizations built into Event Platform, so things like meta tags, schema.org markup, microformats, those are sort of set up for you out of the box. I'm trying to have sharing icons in all the appropriate and obvious places, but there may be some potential work around being able to sort of automatically switch, let's say, article posts to be able to have responsive images by default, as well as there is this module called Generate Social Media Images that we would like to get set up. So it is a best practice for camps to have kind of image cards, so that when there's somebody shares their session on social media, that it has kind of a nicely formatted image there. Most camps are doing that manually today, but this module does have the ability to generate those images. It just needs some work in terms of kind of caching results properly to not put undue load on your web server. Also, as we saw in our example, the emails that get sent out by Event Platform today are text-based, which is not terrible, but not really 2025. So it would be nice to leverage Easy Email, and in particular its recipe Easy Email Express Mail, which is actually in Drupal CMS, so that the Event Platform can send out nicely formatted emails. Instead of those long, ugly URLs, it could have kind of nice buttons, just make it kind of an overall more professional experience. Also today, most camps are using things like Eventbrite, basically external systems, to actually do the sort of paid registration for the event itself. Certainly that could be done using Drupal Commerce. We don't have that as something that's sort of simple to set up today, so it's sort of setting up your standard Drupal Commerce step, but potentially there's a way to sort of wrap that in a recipe if that's something that camps are interested in doing. So, as we talked about already, AI is an interesting Had some thoughts around different ways AI could enhance the experience. So certainly in terms of things like generating summaries or shorter social versions of postings could be useful there. Maybe as a first pass for moderation. Having it potentially do that first pass on scheduling is definitely a very interesting idea. So definitely more to come on the AI basis. But since we're at time, let's conclude by saying would love it if anybody here feels so inspired that you'd like to collaborate and help make the event platform even better. There is a Drupal Slack channel for event platform. We do have monthly meetings. Most of them have been on Zoom. We've done a couple asynchronously on Slack. Probably going to do a bit of a mixture moving forward. And then obviously there are issue queues for event platform and Event Horizon as well. And that is my talk. If anybody has a burning question and doesn't need to run out for it is break time, so there's a question over here.
Thanks. When you were showing the list of accepting the sessions, is there a kind of counter? So that you can say, we have 20 slots and you have 2 left? Because otherwise you might end up sending out too many invitations when you keep on clicking on the thing.
Yeah, that's a really good thought. There isn't that today, but that would be a really good feature. So yeah, I'll try and remember to add that as a feature request. Anybody else? All right, I think we're good. Thanks, everyone.